It is the month of June, and football heats up next month. That means, of course, college teams are back on the gridiron, and so is the NFL in terms of training camp. But will Baker Mayfield be back on the gridiron? It still remains to be seen. He's looking for a contract extension. Could he potentially even hold out of camp and into the preseason? Let's hear from head coach Todd Bowles.
Baker's business. He's all about business. Contract stuff takes care of itself. That's the business side of it that you don't see, that everybody has to see what time. Sure, he'll take care of it, but it doesn't affect you.
Yeah, I think there's really no rush here, Joe, because we are in the month of June, but Mayfield was like one of the MVP candidates in the NFL through the first 8 or 9 games of the season. Now, naturally, I don't know that he necessarily regrets. It's just the Bucs didn't play great football down the stretch, but in this day and age of poor play in the NFL, Baker Mayfield is not one of those. The Bucs are just going to have to step up and pay the guy. I mean, there's really no other alternative here.
Well, that's the whole thing. Like, what is your other choice then? So you have a quarterback, you have a franchise guy, you've got somebody that you know you can win. What's the choice here? You're not going to pay him in order to what? Go through multiple different backup quarterbacks who aren't franchise worthy? It's one of those spots where we like you, but we don't want to pay for you. Like, if you don't have a quarterback, what do you have in Tampa there? That's the big thing, Greg.
Yeah, and not even 15 good quarterbacks in the NFL, I don't think, anymore. Baker Mayfield's in that category. Like, you're just not going to find anyone else. The quarterbacks are getting paid. That's it. All right, Stefon Diggs could potentially get paid, although, Joe, I don't think it will be a lot of money. At least he has his legal issues put behind him. The NFL closed its review of the receiver, citing insufficient evidence to support a personal conduct policy violation, so that paves the way for him to sign with someone. The Patriots have already moved on. Diggs, at one point with Minnesota, certainly one of the best receivers in the NFL. He still has been productive, Joe, but he's not going to be the same receiver that he was in the past. We knew that. Kind of feels a little bit to me, I don't know if you agree with this, like the end of DeAndre Hopkins' career. Like, I still think he's going to get a 1-year contract with somebody, probably on a little bit of a prove-it deal. But New England, they've got A.J. Brown now, so they've moved on. I suppose he'll end up in camp with somebody, though, right?
It's all about price. Right. Every team would love to have him at the right price. So, I mean, he can still play. I'm wondering if there's a reunion in Buffalo in the near future on a 1-year deal. So, but it all depends on him. If his asking price is through the roof, then he's going to have a lot of he might play with a team that's only going to win 6 games here. But if he's willing to be realistic, I am sure he can play on a contender.
Meanwhile, Broncos Jonathan Cooper was arrested again on Thursday night on charges of domestic violence, and certainly his career at this point definitely in some jeopardy. He's had a lot of legal issues as well. Also, the NFL will not discipline Chiefs defensive backs coach Dave Merritt after a misdemeanor domestic battery charge against him was dismissed last month. Merritt had been charged in April with allegedly causing bodily harm to his daughter and pleaded not guilty. The league's investigation found insufficient evidence of a personal conduct policy violation. And finally, some sad news from the National Football League. Once upon a time, a great edge rusher, defensive lineman Aldon Smith in the NFL has passed away at the age of 36. No cause of death given. He played, of course, for the 49ers, was a very late pick in the 7th round, and turned his entire life and career around by posting 19.5 sacks in 2012. He earned a Pro Bowl and All-Pro honors, went from the 49ers, was unhappy there. He ended up going to the Raiders, played in the Cowboys organization as well. 49ers this weekend saying that they were devastated by his passing, and certainly we here at SportsGrid are as well, Joe. Aldon Smith certainly had his share of stuff going on the field, but when you hear a story like this, it's always hits you.
Yeah, unfortunately, he had just as much going on off the field throughout, and there was a period of time, Craig, where I thought this guy was like Lawrence Taylor-esque. He was unblockable. Like, I mean, no matter what teams did, when he was with early on in those 49ers, my goodness, I thought he was going to be around a long time, setting all sorts of records. It's just, at 36 years old, such a sad story.
Yeah, indeed it is. And certainly that beat goes on in the NFL don't want to assume anything here, but Certainly mental health, a very hot topic in sports, and should be as well. Got to take care of these guys who are putting their life in danger every day with those helmets. Welcome back to Prediction Markets Edge here on the early line. Let's take a look at some of the National Football League predictions that you can find over on Kalshi, and taking a look with right now Stefon Diggs being cleared by the National Football League to sign and play with another team, and it does not appear that he'll face any suspension for any off-the-field activities. Here are some, Joe, of the teams that are involved on Kalshi to potentially have him land. The Ravens at 38%, the Commanders at 19%, Buffalo at 12%, the Rams at 5%. You mentioned Buffalo earlier in the show at 12% is something that, Joe, potentially you could be interested in investing in. Ravens is an interesting one for me now that I see it. Obviously, Zay Flowers is their primary receiver, but they've really had a hard time finding secondary and sometimes third options. Same could be said for Washington as well.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, but I also think maybe the Rams, if he wants to go maybe ring shopping here, Craig, if he's more interested in winning more than anything else, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, you throw in, heck, maybe even Aaron Donald coming off the cap. If you want to be a part of something very interesting, for a little less money with a chance to actually run it back to get to the Super Bowl, I don't know why the Rams can't be considered in that conversation either.
And the Rams, of course, made the big acquisition to get Myles Garrett a few weeks ago, which puts them over on Kalshi as the favorite. 24% of the tickets for them to win the Super Bowl are on them, followed by Seattle at 13%. And then you could basically make a case for anyone, Joe. I mean, we're still far away from trying to figure out who's going to get to the Super Bowl. Things change so quickly. But when you look at it, is there any team in particular that you'd like to take a flyer on in the prediction markets and just sort of ride the wave?
It's too chalky here at this point, and there's a lot of very much unknowns here. But the beautiful thing about the prediction markets, Greg, is it also not only do we have the yes option, but we have the no option here, and they all can't win it, right? They all can't run it back. So, but right now there seems to be an all very chalky up at the top with the Seattles and the Rams and. Well, they all can't win it, so there might be some value in saying, you know what? Don't think it's going to happen here. Maybe invest in a couple of no's across the board with some of those favorites.
Now let's take a look at the AFC Championship, and this is where it gets really interesting because certainly for the first time in a while last season, the Kansas City Chiefs did not make the playoffs. It would appear that Patrick Mahomes will be ready for, if not the first game of the season, Joe, maybe the second. I think that his return it feels imminent, but again, we'll find out what happens in training camp. But it's Buffalo, it's Baltimore, it's Kansas City. It feels like we've just been in the same cycle for the last few years. Do you think it's that same cycle this year again?
Yeah, well, we got to have Denver in the conversation here too as well, which is also another interesting spot for Diggs because outside of Jalen Waddle that the Broncos traded for, it's not like Bo Nix has got a ton of other weapons there. He can always use somebody else who can catch the ball, certainly going over the middle here. I think Denver is very much alive and well in the AFC East as well, but a healthy, and that's going to be interesting. Now you have a healthy Patrick Mahomes coming back. That it's going to be one or two of them, right? I'm not a big believer in what's going on with the Chargers, but I believe if anybody's going to get Kansas City, it's going to be Denver again this year.
And how about the NFL's best record, where I guess what's happened in the prediction market space, Joe, from my understanding here, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm, deep in the weeds with baseball this time of the year, is that when the schedule came out in the NFL, it was determined that the Lions had the easiest schedule. And so Kalshi has them at 12%. Is that accurate, that Detroit just has this softer schedule, I guess, based on last season? And is that something that you can invest in with teams and their records the year before?
Well, no, I would. It's not a market that I would invest in this early, simply, Craig, for the fact that there's a lot of question marks around that team with Detroit. Namely, what are you going to do with that offensive line? You need to figure that out here because that's the big issue there. We know defensively they'll likely be okay, but a lot of turnover last couple of years with assistant coaches and whatnot. I would be cautious about just assuming that Detroit is going to – and look at the division they're in, right? Green Bay's not getting worse. Chicago, everyone's darling, not going anywhere anytime soon. So tough division to want to say, you know what? They're going to have the most wins when it comes down to it. I don't know about that. I have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, I think that's a good analysis there, too, because, again, teams going into the season, the record last year is sort of so irrelevant. And speaking of which, both the Cardinals and the Dolphins were fighting last year. They didn't come close to the playoffs, but they were fighting for playoff positioning. Like, those are two teams you thought that could make it, and they didn't. And now they're considered the worst teams in the league. Kalshi has them neck and neck for the worst record in the NFL, with the Jets being close behind. But I think, Joe, this market is correct. I do think one of those two teams ends up with the worst record in the NFL.
It's not going to be pretty here. They're both rebuilds, right? New coaching staffs, new everything coming in. And yeah, quite honestly, they've got this next year to figure some things out here. Both Arizona, Miami, at least they pulled the plug and said, we got to restart, but it looks like they might have a quarterback that they can embrace over the next couple of years, which is the most important position, right? So new front office there, but I still go back to the Jets here. I sign Russell Wilson, get him out of the booth, unretire him, get him the backup Geno, win 2 games, go get your quarterback this year in the draft at #1, and then we can look, hopefully, for the future for the New York Jets. But I think they're going to be terrible once again.
You know, another team that didn't show up there for me is the Browns. Are the Browns supposed to be like this good team? I thought it looks like to me that they're headed in the other direction. I know they made a trade, but it seemed like that trade with the Rams was more for the future than it is for the present. And sometimes when a team sends you a signal like that, I think you got to take it. So we'll see.